To what extent is this app's environment not only an opportunity but also a potential threat?
When you're dealing with traditional forms of content like games and so on, they typically tend to come from established game publishers, so it's relatively easier. But when you open up an environment to just about anyone to go and publish an app, the risk level goes up. Vodafone's role in the ecosystem is more about a distribution element, since we're not moderating the content essentially, except in terms of adult content verifications and so on. But otherwise, it's not really a moderated environment, so the app developer has to take the liability and indemnify a distribution partner, and the app developer is responsible for going and securing the rights. As an operator, what you're also worried about in these scenarios is virus situations. And piracy as well.
Clearly, all these activities around monitoring and managing and evaluating risk have a price tag attached to them because they have an operational cost. Is the opportunity worth that cost?
I would say yes, because the opportunity here is to provide the consumer the content that they need. So it's about consumer experience. And if we as an operator cannot provide that, the consumer will very well go away to another operator. I don't think many consumers today go and buy handsets or smartphones simply because it has a certain amount of content on it. They have, because I mean, an app store with 50,000 or 100,000 apps, no consumer will be able to tell you exactly what content is in the handset. So it's predominantly about the possibility of going and discovering content that they presume is going to be there. Once they go in and they start buying the apps, that's where the discovery starts to happen. And the key aspect there is how do they find the app that they want. If we are able to help them find the right content, that's a value add.
So you feel the operator can play a valuable role in terms of content discovery and navigation?
I think this is very similar to the way the record industries handled stuff like Napster and other stuff, where it was so defensive that they effectively sued them out of existence. And the result was massive piracy, total loss of control, and now iTunes monopoly. And so I think that today, sure, there's valid concerns around piracy and there's risks and all this stuff, but the cat's out of the bag. Consumers like smartphones, they like tablets, there's no going back. And so I think the question is, how do we manage it? I think it's not a black or white question of, is it worth the risk? Because you know what? The consumers are going to do it anyway. We either provide them with a legal, structured way to do it, or they're going to take it.
So and obviously Disney content sits at the heart of the business. Is this environment, does it present a threat to you, an opportunity? How do you...
It's very much an opportunity, and here's why. For Disney, it's about staying relevant to the consumer, and as our consumers' behavior changes, we need to be there.
Embrace it.
And so it is a way for us to keep in touch with our consumers. I think the value of the space is that because you have a more intimate relationship with the consumer, we actually get a better understanding, which in turn allows us to create better product. You know, we've published books in the digital space that may not actually have been in circulation in the physical space for some time. You know, they were kind of put effectively in a moratorium. We've brought them back out just in digital format, and we've found that we've been able to reach a whole new audience, and the uptake has been phenomenal. So for us, we see it as a way of really staying in touch with the consumer and giving them what they want.
And John, how does this resonate with you from a Sky perspective?
Well, I suppose just chiming in with your point, there are two things. One is about engagement. The second thing is about being ready for future platforms. So, to deal with the second, 2 years ago, an app was a kind of slightly nebulous concept, and even a year ago, the idea of tablets being quite so dominant already was kind of being laughed at, really. So I think we've got to be ready in how we're producing our content to, next year be in a whole different area of connected screens. So I think what we're looking at is how we can, from a news perspective, how we can create, the kind of news on all platforms that people expect, but optimizing them for all of those platforms in a way that isn't too manpower intensive, but is actually saying, there are different expectations on a red button service to an iPad to an iPhone. When we look at the iPhone, what's very interesting about it is the engagement levels are incredibly high. They're not only high on video, which is a much higher engagement than online, but just in terms of pages viewed. I mean, it's essentially there are kind of it's a third fewer people using it every week, but they're viewing about as many pages as, so a third of the total web uniques, but they're viewing as many pages as those web users.
Given that we're at a media conference and entertainment and so on, when we talk about apps in this arena, we tend to think of it in terms of an entertainment platform. The question is the apps thing a fad, but also what's it about? Is it about more than entertainment? Is that the tip of the iceberg?
I think it's really important to understand why apps are so big. It's because of the user experience. The day that the mobile web gets as good or even as close to good as an app is the day that myself and many others will go into that space and forget apps. But users interact with apps, and it's off the charts compared to the mobile web. And so are apps a fad? I don't know. Is Microsoft Office a fad because Google Docs exist? Because that's really a good comparison, because Office is an app and Google Docs is cloud-based. I don't know the answer, but I can tell you for the next couple of years, I don't see anything paradigm shifting that's going to make the mobile web the same or even close to the same experience as apps, and consumers respond right now to apps.
And is it primarily about entertainment and the sorts of companies we have represented on this podium, or is it?
Not at all. I'll put it this way. If you've got content, whether it's entertainment or any content, right now, an app is the best way to package and distribute that content where people are going to engage with it the most.
Okay.
In the future, that may change.
I mean, future gazing for me, I see app development. I mean, I think it's very easy to make predictions and then make it look really stupid. But the way I see it is that we should use them as a way of innovating, because I think, you know, we know that there's engagement, we know that there's a kind of massive interest there, so we should use them as a kind of way of taking a leap in various directions, whether it's, you know, the kind of content you're creating, how you're optimizing it for touch, how it might work, and then actually the web may end up looking more, as Michael says, looking more like that. You know, you just have to look at the Twitter app on the iPad, you look at the website redesign, it's actually quite a lot like the Twitter app for iPad. I think that's kind of the direction, I think, where things may increasingly go.
Sonnia?
No, I was just going to say, in terms of the potential usage, I think it's pretty limitless. Today, entertainment is the big category. That's where the bulk of the revenue will come from on the store, but that's by no means where it's going to be in the future. You know, some of the initiatives we're looking at within our publishing group, you know, look at kind of coursework, English coursework, which we do in China and some of the other territories. That's big, and we're looking at bringing that onto these devices and these platforms, you know.
And of course, no one's talked about the location-based opportunity and what the world that opens.
That's
well.
right.
Very briefly, Hemant, anything to add to?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, like I was mentioning in the Vodafone shop page, and even from Vodafone Live, we see the local relevance apps having a large chunk of downloads as well, and they don't even have to be entertainment apps. They are apps like national railways or, you know, timetables of the local areas and so on, which are utilities which people need.